So I'm going to be showing you guys how I make black oil, and I use black oil a lot, so I'm going to be showing you both how to make it and then how to use it safely, both in terms of your health and the longevity of your painting. So the most important ingredient is litharge, which I'll explain a little bit later what exactly that is, but it is lead. It's a lead-based pigment. So it's actually made from lead. So it's essentially lead white that is oxidized. It's heated in a kiln, and so an extra oxygen bonds to it and makes it lead oxide 3, and it also gives it this yellow color. And so this is what we want to use for the black oil. So I'm measuring out the ratio, which is you can use anywhere between 3 to 10%. You really don't want to use 10% or any higher than that, but 3 to 10% weight by volume. So I'm measuring grams versus the milliliters I'm using the oil for. And so I'm just using cold pressed linseed oil, and you don't have to worry about it being super refined or filtered off, because the cold press, this is from Rublev, are natural pigments, and it's already been filtered and settled and all that stuff, but it is still cold pressed, so there still could be some kind of mucus that you could take out if you cleaned it yourself. But I'm not too worried about that, because I'll be heating it up to the point where any impurities in the oil will actually burn off. And that's actually what you'll see with the little, if you can see a little bit of the smoke that comes up. So I found this trick, or I learned this trick the hard way by not doing it. But basically, if you take a little bit of oil and add it into your litharge or your lead oxide 3, and then mix it around with a palette knife and mull it around a little bit, the oil will bond to the pigment particles, which will make it incorporate into the oil, the hot oil, much easier. If you just kind of pour it in dry, it'll have the tendency to kind of separate. And so this kind of forces the oil to surround the pigment, which then allows it to mix into the oil a lot easier. So let me talk about the heat, because that's a really crucial part of the black oil, is you don't want to burn the oil. So I guess the instructor who taught me how to make this, he's been doing it for decades. But basically, there's a couple different ways I've seen for like temperatures and processes of how to do this. The way I was taught was to bring it to 180 degrees Celsius. You really don't want to go too much higher than that. One thing that like I've heard people say is like, oh, you can heat it up a little bit past that 180 degrees Celsius and then bring it back down, and cycling between bringing it up like maybe like 5, 10, 15 degrees above and then dropping it back down fast, so it doesn't stay at that above 180 for a long period of time, will actually help the lead dissolve into it. I don't. It's if you want to play it safe, just stick around 180 degrees Celsius. I think this is one of those things that everyone will kind of tell you a slightly different temperature, but you really don't want to go too hot, so it's better to err on the side. I guess if you go too low in temperature, the lead won't be able to dissolve into the oil. If you go too high, you are going to burn your oil, and then that won't be like you'll know if it's burnt, because it will just be a really, I don't know how to describe it. It's a really weird consistency. It's not helpful. It's not good. So I have that kind of mixed up. I added a little too much oil in it, so into the litharge, and so it's a little hard to get into the actual mix. But I'm mixing around the oil, and you can see I had a little bit of litharge on my palette knife, and so that kind of dissolved around, and that's what you kind of see sinking at the bottom. And so the whole purpose of black oil is to try to get that lead to dissolve into the oil. This is the whole name to the game. And so you can see I'm raising the temperature. I have this in Celsius. You can, I don't know, easily figure out the conversion for Fahrenheit. I just have a toggle on my thermometer. You 100% need a thermometer. And it's also really important to say that the same thing with when I make lead white. All the materials I'm using for this, I'm considering a hazard. So I'm not using like anything that touches this, it has lead. For my situation, I'm just saying it has lead forever, just so I don't have any sort of contamination with anything that I don't want to have lead, for my own safety, and just so I know. So all this stuff I know is lead, is contaminated with lead. And so the name of the game is to try to get the lead to dissolve. And I've made it 4 or 5 times. And it's all taken around 2.5, 3 hours. I've heard people say like, oh, it only took me 2 hours this time, but then this next time it took me 4 hours. So I don't know, there seems to be a lot of variables in it. I mean, I guess if you're playing with the temperature and it's going up and down, there's just a lot of fluctuation and stuff like that. But it is quite a time-consuming thing. So once I get this going, I'll just be letting it sit and just like checking back every half an hour to kind of stir it around a little bit. But it's really important not to overheat it. So I'll be bringing it up hot and a little over, and there'll be a little bit of smoke, and it won't be. It'll just be the linseed oil burning off the impurities, and then I'll be dropping it back down, trying to stay around 180 degrees Celsius for the remainder of the 2.5-ish hours it took me to make this. Now, one thing also to talk about is, it's litharge is lead white that's heated in a kiln, so an extra oxygen bonds to it and turns it yellow. So I guess a question I had when I first started making this is, can I use lead white to add in this? And I don't know the exact scientific reason, but and I also don't know if this is like an old wives' tale or not, but I've heard that it can become like volatile, like kind of explosive, I guess, adding in just lead white into it. I don't exactly, I haven't tried it. I haven't bothered to try it. I just have litharge. But I like all the textbooks will say litharge, and so I would assume there's a reason for it. Somebody probably figured out the hard way and burned their hand or something. But then there's also, litharge is lead with an extra oxygen molecule bonded to it. If you heat it in a kiln even longer, it will turn to minimum, which is actually a red color. It's like a bright red color. And this is 100%, it's just lead. It's just an additional oxygen molecule bonded to that. And I've heard that you can also use that, but pretty much all the books will tell you to use litharge, so I just stick with that. But I also think some of them don't differentiate between, it's just an extra or more oxygen molecules bonded to it. I would assume it has something to do with how it can bond to the oil. But, I'm more of a practical chemist than a theoretical one, so I just know it works. I don't exactly know why it works. But anyway, so I'm mixing this around, and has this really cool kind of cloudy effect, really cool color. But then it will kind of sink to the bottom, and it will also kind of clump, and it just takes a long time for that litharge to reach a threshold where it gives up and then it starts bonding to the lead. So don't get discouraged, or to the oil, because it takes a long time. So you can see I'm getting pretty toasty right now, so I'm going to be pulling it up from the heat and dropping it down fast because I don't want it to burn. And this is going to darken quite a lot, but I want to be showing some demonstrations at the end. So you can see this is at the end, so this is about 2.5 hours later. It's darkened quite substantially, but it's very transparent, and we're going to be letting this sit. You ideally want to let it sit for a week or a couple of weeks before you use it to let any sediment, I'll show at the end, like let that settle. So I'm pretty happy with the temperature, and the test to tell if it's done is you kind of splash it around a little bit and you see what the bubbles do. When the lead is in the oil, the bubbles won't pop as much. They will stay quite they'll just last longer, and they'll also have the sheen to this, the shine to it. And so here, let's see. And so I have a good feel. You can kind of do this at the beginning before it's done, so you can kind of see what it's like. And then at the end, like I'm looking at the rim, there's tons of little bubbles that are really reflective, almost like an oil slick, and they're not popping. So that's a good sign. That tells me that the lead is into the oil and it's ready. Okay, now we're ready to bottle it. So my label you'll see is a 1-to-10 ratio. I ended up doing something different with that. So it's actually about a 1-to-20, so about 5%. I just had it labeled wrong. So this is my container that I used for the last batch, and I can see the sediment that is after letting it sit for, months, but the sediment kind of built up after the first couple weeks on the bottom. That's completely normal, and so I could spend a bunch of time and get all, I don't really want to deal with that, so I'm just going to pour onto top of that and just let the other sediment kind of just sink to the bottom after a couple of weeks. It will also turn more transparent once that sediment settles down to the bottom. So that's ideally why you want to let that go to the bottom. So you can see with this demonstration, I'm using this oil. It's still hot. So there's sediment in it. It hasn't settled down and it's hot. So this is like the orangest, the most black that this oil will ever be. So I'm going to be doing this demonstration. So my dry mix is just chalk. So I'm just adding the black oil and the chalk to make a putty. The chalk's, it's pretty much 100% transparent. So this will just kind of show you the color of the oil, how crazy orange and black it is. But I'm going to be showing you how weak it is. So I have titanium white on the other side. And the reason why I'm using titanium white to show this demonstration is because you wouldn't want to use black oil in lead white, because lead white dries super fast. And if you add black oil to it, it'll just increase the drying time. It'll speed up the drying time even more, and then it could actually crack because you don't want things to dry too fast. So anyways, this would be a use as far as the lights go. I wouldn't use it in lead white, but I'm going to be showing you how little impact it actually has on the color of the lead, or sorry, of the white pigment. So one of the strongest selling points for black oil that really got me, had my ears perk up, is when I heard this one instructor I'm thinking of specifically, who's been using it for decades. He basically had this really cool insight that all linseed oil will darken over time, even the stuff that is super clear and transparent. If you get the really high quality linseed oil, it'll still darken over time with the just the age over hundreds of years. So if you're thinking of doing paintings over like that, you want it to you're thinking very long term about it. If you use black oil, it's already as dark as it's already going to get. It's not going to get any darker. So you're painting with black oil and you're keying it. You're making those adjustments because maybe your lightest lights are just a touch darker. Making that adjustment and keying your painting in relation to that, your painting is not going to change at all over time if you do it right, which is such a cool thing. You don't have to worry about it darkening the oil darkening the painting. That is like you would if you were using really pale oil. So anyways, this is my palette that I was using today. I wasn't really expecting to film this, so it's a little, I probably would have tried to fake you guys out and make it much more organized. But anyway, so this is the lead white that I made. And then on the other end is the ivory black that I made. And the ivory black is made with black oil. The lead white is not. And so I don't want black oil to get into the lead white in a large quantity. So by having the black oil into the ivory black mix, then when I mix all the colors from that, the darks will have more black oil in it and the lights will have less, just because I'm using less black as the color gets light. And so this is the way that I can not even have to think about it, but I'm controlling the ratio of black oil that's getting into the pigment. And so this allows the lead white or the ivory black to dry faster and to not sink in, which was just what I hated so much about painting at the academy was the sinking in and then the extended drying time that the ivory black took in contrast with how fast the lead white would dry. So anyways, this is my solution to that, and this is the way I've been painting the last 2 or 3 years. I guess I've been experimenting, and that this has kind of been what I've come to a conclusion to. So anyways, I hope this gave you some food for thought, something to think about, maybe to try.